I don't know if I want you to read that. You're not going to get a lot out of this because it's either weirdly violent or about a sad adult man being a sad adult man. I don't know if that's going to mean a lot to you.
Also having sex with a cat on a rooftop.
Yeah, that's weird. Boy, that threw me off.
Come on and visit for any occasion. Don't keep patting down waiting. Comics and conversation. Keep the conversation moving along. Keep reading comics, keep your local store strong. If it's hard, then it's a job for the challengers. Comics and conversation, y'all.
From Challengers Comics and Conversation in Chicago, this is Contest of Challengers. And now, here are Patrick Brower and W. Dal Bush.
So really, doing these now is kind of a mixed bag.
How so?
Well, due to our increasingly busy schedules, we have taken to recording slightly earlier in the week than we used to, and it seems that every time we record on a Thursday, there's this massive news dump on Fridays.
Are you suggesting that we're tempting fate somehow?
I think so.
Okay.
I can't imagine.
Well, let me say in advance then, to where we are in time versus when this podcast goes live and people can hear it, I would like to apologize both in advance and retroactively to whoever lost their jobs in the intervening time.
Yes. Sorry
so
everyone.
Whatever imprint got canceled or whatever people were let go from companies, anyone's publishing plans or lives that were interrupted in the comics industry as a result of us recording this early in the week, I apologize. That is not, I would mention, legally actionable, so please do not try and contact us with your lawyers for recompense.
Yes,
this is a Canadian apology where I'm sorry for you and your circumstance, but I'm not claiming responsibility.
Yes, you did not lose your job because of Dal.
Right.
That is not why he is apologizing.
Right.
I am certainly a creature of habit, and as I get older, sometimes I forget things.
Okay, like what?
Sure, there's a history of that in my family. Like what you say?
Uh-huh.
Like posting last week's episode?
I was wondering what caused that. I didn't want to be like a bother and be like, hey, where is it?
Here's what caused that. I will tell you exactly what caused that.
Uh-huh.
Once the episode is edited and ready to post,
Uh-huh.
now, patrons didn't notice any difference because I already had that taken care of.
That was up for them already.
And because you can schedule those in advance.
Okay.
And I'd sent it to JVO at Yak Channel.
Sure.
So none of that was affected. But what I do when it's ready to go, hopefully it's ready a day or two before it posts,
sure,
is I leave both WavePad and Notepad open on my desktop as a reminder. Well, when your computer updates in the middle of the night and those things aren't on screen, it may be out of your mind, especially since it was done. Like, if I knew I still had to go back and edit something, then it would be more prevalent on my mind. But once it's finished, I kind of move on.
Sure.
An example of that is this week, we had some questions about an order we needed to change with our supply distributor. Mm-hmm. And you had asked me to take care of it last week.
Right.
Which I set it in motion.
Right.
And then, because I did that and I knew, well, it's done until it comes up on Wednesday's phone call, it's out of my mind.
Sure.
So when you said Tuesday night, hey, when you're talking to Southern Hobby about this thing tomorrow, and I'm like, why am I talking to Southern Hobby about that? In my head, I'm thinking this. I'm like, no, that's taken care of. That's already... Oh, wait, no, that's only the first half.
Yes.
Like, I literally...
You just primed it. You didn't actually solve it.
Well, I wouldn't have brought it up because I wouldn't have remembered to.
Right.
But I wouldn't have to because it would have been brought up by our rep because the seeds were already there.
Yep.
So I do enough to to get it, set it in motion. I was going to say to remember it, but obviously I didn't. To set it in motion. So, yeah, that was an immediate, why am I talking to them about that? That's taken care. Oh, right.
Oh,
yeah.
no.
Yeah, that was a quick thing that went through my head that I did not vocalize when talking with you. Mm. And also in that last few minutes, I'm like, all these things, oh, you should mention this, you should mention this, flooded through my head, and now they're all gone.
Okay.
they're gone.
That's
but
fine.
Nonetheless, while I'm sure many people noticed the podcast didn't get posted until Monday night, nobody said anything about it.
I wonder if it's because the people most likely to notice are patrons.
Maybe.
And they already got it, so they had no idea it didn't go up.
I mean, we do have upwards of 1,000 listeners per episode.
Sure. Most of them human.
Yeah,
well, some of them human, not most of them.
Not provable.
Yeah.
I say upwards of 1,000, like that's a lot in podcasts.
1,101.
There's only 14. Oh, that's not true. There's only 14 of the thank you patrons. There's more in the you get the episodes early.
So that's what I'm thinking, is the percentage of people who would notice because they listen to it first thing in the week when it goes up are all people who got it early.
Like patrons get it when applicable Saturday evenings at 8 o'clock. That's how I said it. Can we set things on the website? Can we schedule?
Yeah.
I'll start doing that then.
Yeah, super easy. I'll show you how.
Okay. Well, for now, until you redesign it.
That's at least a few months away.
Also, that doesn't affect the back end.
No, it really doesn't.
Usually it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, the only things that affect the back end are when we upgrade, like, the back end database, and that is a completely separate thing from redesigning the website.
Boy, I tell you, speaking of updating the back end is a great transition.
You're welcome.
But I don't have anything that goes to it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, sorry. So I think what we're going to jump to first this week's episode is we actually have some questions from Ryan Alcock, who had posed them last week, but we'd already recorded.
Okay.
So it was before he would have heard the episode.
Sure.
So he may have been thinking that we were going to get to them, and we didn't. So we'll get to them now.
Okay.
Number one, it's been well over a year. How is genre racking working out?
I think really well. We'll definitely be able to talk more about it at the end of this year because we'll have a lot more data to go off of.
True, we will have a full year.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to since we did it in early 2018, we'll have a lot more months of comparison 2018 to 2019 to be able to say, like, how do we think these things are going? Are certain sections moving more or less? But in general, anecdotally, I think it's going really well.
It's such an easy recommendation tool when somebody says...
Oh, easy, yeah.
And the example I always give is horror.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people lately who seem to be asking for more horror things. Like, great, here's our horror section.
We just had a guy who was in Tuesday or Wednesday. I think it was Wednesday.
Wednesday, yeah. That's one of the reasons I referenced that.
Who's like, I'm looking for some horror stuff to read. I just read Lock and Key. I also read, and he named like one or two other things. I'm like, okay, well, you're looking for graphic novels or single comics? Like, graphic novels, great. Here's our horror section. Here's Infidel. Let me explain that. Here's House of Penance. Let me explain that. I don't know how about Nailbiter? I've read all of Nailbiter. Cool. Have you read Plastic? Like, here's Plastic. And he's like, these all sound great. So he bought all three of them. And it was way easier to do that than having to walk around an entire store and try and remember, like, all right, based on what he's told me, what few things can I pick up that he's going to be interested in? I mean, there's a bunch more I could have mentioned, but he responded really well to the first three and was like, great, I'm done. Perfect.
Two quick things about the horror section. One, is it true we're going to rename it the Joe Hill section?
Yes.
Later in October?
That is absolutely true.
Okay. Number two is an anecdote where a week or so ago I had two younger readers in, and by younger I'm going to say 14 because that's what they said.
Okay.
And they were asking for a lot of like really gory suggestions.
14-year-olds? Yeah, of course they are.
And I'm not comfortable giving any of that. So, So the stuff that they're like, they weren't saying, hey, do you have this thing? They're saying, do you have something that's like psychedelic gore, blah, 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 and I'm not helping them.
No.
So anyway, at the end of their time in the store, they come up with Plastic.
Sure.
And I said, all right, how old are you? And the one of them says, 14. All right, kid, here's the deal. This book is R-rated. Do not get caught with it.
Yeah. So
I'm letting you buy this. I like Plastic a lot. I think a 14-year-old in today's society can handle it.
Right.
There is no sex or nudity. It's just violence and profanity. And when I say just violence, I mean, the way you're laughing makes me think you got a phone call.
No. So about a week or two ago, there was a couple teenagers in. I would say probably like 15 or 16. They're looking around for a while, and one of them finally wants to buy something, and what they want to buy is a Walk Through Hell Volume 1. And I'm like, because I read a Walk Through Hell, I'm like, I can't. Like, if you got a parent with you, I'll let you get it, but I can't sell you this. I'm sorry. But then, like, they put it back, and the same kid comes up, like, 5 minutes later with Deadly Class Volume 1. And in my head, I'm like, this is mature readers too. But you know what? Fine.
Yeah.
Like,
and on a scale...
If you're a teenager, I think maybe you're the perfect audience for Deadly Class.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'm like, I'll let Deadly Class slide. I didn't say anything. I didn't do, like, this is a secret between you and me, teenage boy.
Yeah.
But I definitely was thinking, like, this is maybe a problem down the line, but right now I think it's fine. And I would argue that despite mature readers being on the back label of Deadly Class, that a teenage audience is fine for Deadly Class.
I'm a little worried about you saying the phrase, this is a secret between you and me, teenage boy.
Oh, I phrased it that way.
But you specifically said it wasn't that.
Sure.
And my instance wasn't to be the cool guy at the shop. It was he can handle this. I don't want to deprive him of a thing.
Sure.
It's a comic book.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm sure you and I both had stories about being teenagers and experiencing media that was probably not meant for our age, but getting a lot out of it and having it be really exciting. And not, like, you know, damaging in any way so much as it was just like, oh, this is, like, more mature than I usually get credit for interacting with. You know?
Yeah, my parents took me to the theater to see the movie 10 when it came out. And I was definitely underage for that.
Sure.
But don't worry.
Lifelong love affair with Bo Derek.
I had my mom's hand over my eyes for a lot of that movie.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a teenager, there was a lot of stuff at the local library in the graphic novel section that maybe they should not have let me check out, but I was happy
Alan Moore's Neonomicon?
If only. I was a teenager in a much earlier era, so my Alan Moore was V for Vendetta and Watchmen and some other sci-fi horror-ish stuff that was in the, like, I'm sure there's some other stuff, Swamp Thing or whatever.
Sure.
Where, like, maybe I was too young for that, but it was a comic book, and it was a library, and they didn't care.
This is getting off topic, but Jackie Estrada, who is one of the organizers of the San Diego Comic-Con, or if you prefer, Comic-Con International San Diego.
Or do not.
She is also, well, she's someone that we've dealt with before about trying to get video from our Eisner win, but she does a lot of thankless work behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But she's also, like, the unofficial archivist. She takes a lot of photos, and she's put out 2 hardcover books, which are right over there, Comic Book People.
Okay.
But on her Facebook feed this week, she's been doing flashbacks to different years, like 81 through 85 so far, of all of her photos of San Diego for that year.
Yeah.
And it's so great.
Yeah.
Like, just the pictures of Alan Moore meeting Jack Kirby.
Oh my gosh.
Them shaking hands.
So cool.
There's so many really young Frank Miller photos. There's like, it's a fun test to me, like, who do I recognize? And I mean, obviously it was a long time ago.
Right.
But it's also at a point where that's when I started going to the Chicago Comic-Con.
Yeah.
So, like, that scene is not super unfamiliar to me.
Sure.
But it's also great to see the more classic and golden age artists who show up in jackets and ties.
Sure.
And then
you're in public. Of course you wear a jacket and a tie.
Right, but then you have, like, you know, really young Art Adams photos.
Sure.
Or Marv Wolfman with a shirt, like a super loud, or Chris Claremont with a super loud Hawaiian shirt.
Sure.
Like, unbuttoned down to the middle.
The navel. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to genre racking. We're very happy with it.
Yeah, I got no complaints.
I did have somebody a week or so ago be like, you changed everything around. Like, I didn't even notice that it was different. Actually, 2 different people I want to say in the last 2 weeks who did not see that there were signs at the top of each shelf that says...
No one ever does.
No, I know. But
I wish that were different, but it's not. No one ever sees any signs we make.
Or how often people don't realize, like, oh no, the superhero stuff is just that side.
Right.
That's all you need to be.
Yeah.
And someone's like, well, I guess it gets tough because there's a lot of, like, subgenres and things. Like, it doesn't.
Yeah.
You're just saying that because you can't find what you want.
And that's the thing. Like, with genre racking, there's always this fear of, like, is it too convoluted? Is it too confusing? Is it too specific to what we view a book as? But the secret is that every racking system you devise is going to be impenetrable to somebody. like when we did, Marvel, DC, Image, the way that a certain section of hardcore longtime fans would be able to immediately figure out, oh, the Spider-Man graphic novel I'm looking for is in the Marvel section, but the Batman one's in the DC section, and the Saga graphic novel is going to be in the Image section. There's a lot of people who don't know any of that stuff, so they don't know where to find anything, and they're not going to be able to figure it out.
Sure.
Conversely, there have been times where we did strict alphabetical, and then we'd have people go, where's the manga? And it's like, well, it's under every letter. That's not helpful to them. They want to see a manga section. That's all they want is manga. They don't care.
Yeah, manga is such a weird thing to me where it doesn't... Genre breakdown doesn't matter for that. It's just the manga section.
Yeah, arguably it could, but we just don't have enough manga to really make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
Like, if we had 14 bookshelves of manga, we'd probably be more apt to try and break it down by some delineation, whether that's age or genre or whatever.
I can't remember what book it was, but there was a book that someone was looking for last Saturday, and I'm like, yeah, of course we have that, so go to drama. Can't find it. I'm like, that's so weird. Maybe we're out of it. Go to the system. No, it says we have it. Oh, it's in crime. And I can't remember the title, but both the person looking for it and myself were like, crime, huh? But sure enough, when you get the book and turn it over to the back, the first thing it says is crime.
Yeah.
Like, and I even said, I'm like, look, we don't pick the categories. We go what we're told with. And it specifically says. But it was a book that I read, and I thought, I didn't realize that was crime. I'll remember as soon as we turn this off.
No, that happens pretty frequently, where Diamond will suggest a genre, and the book will suggest a different genre, and then internally I'll think, I don't know if I, as a fan of this book, would think to look at this section for it, but eventually you just got to pick something, and it's got to go someplace.
Right, but the moral of the story, we found the book.
Yeah, and
he got the book he wanted.
And again, there is no perfect ranking system. We've tried so many over 11 years, and there's always edge cases. There's always people who are like, I can't find this thing because your system doesn't make sense to me. So if you assume a certain percentage, that is always going to happen. As long as the percentage is lower than it was during a previous version of your racking, it's a win.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like where we're at with it. The sales bear that out. The interactions we've had with people and the anecdotes that we've been able to talk about today show that I think it works. I don't foresee us changing it from genre racking anytime soon.
Agreed. Question number 2.
Those.
I'm sure...
That was my presidential debate tip in there.
Oh.
For our Spanish language
Does that mean I have to speak Farsi tonight? Is that how that's going to work?
Dos. See, I care about all my constituents.
Yes,
that wasn't awkward at all.
No.
Anyway, moving on.
Which was more awkward? Beto or Booker?
Beto, just because it seemed like everything was going awkward for Beto during that debate. There's some great screen caps, and I don't want this to be a political podcast or anything, but there were some great screen caps of just people looking at Beto while he's talking. Other, like, people on the platform.
The other debaters.
Yeah, the other presidential candidates, Democratic candidates, looking at him in disbelief as his mouth is open and he's saying words, which was just... perfect.
So I'm sure people that listen to this have come across a particular recurring ICV2 column by Jim McLaughlin called 3x3 Retail 3x3.
Yeah.
And it's where a comic book retailer is interviewed. I've done it before. And he asks you 3 things you've done right, 3 things you've done wrong, and other things you want to say. The most recent one was Mile High and Chuck Rosansky, Chuck from Colorado.
Yep.
Chuck Rosansky, the longtime comic book retailer.
Yeah, decades.
And it was a very polarizing 3x3, I was going to say interview, within the retail community.
Yeah.
And basically, Ryan's question was, have you seen it? What are your thoughts?
So I actually made a note of this because there's a few things that, due to the way that we've been recording, and like Patrick said at the beginning, that we have missed some Friday and weekend developments. This was one of the things where I'm like, it was from a couple weeks ago, but I want to come back to it because we never really got a chance to talk about it.
So I'm going to sit here and read this Teen Titans Raven. You go ahead and talk.
So to recap, for people who didn't get a chance to look at it, if you go to...
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say out loud?
Yeah, that was out loud.
All right.
ICV2.com, you can check it out. it was different than the usual 3x3 because instead of 3 things that Chuck thinks he did right and 3 things he thinks he did wrong, Jim McLaughlin basically goes like, Chuck likes to talk. So here's a lot of stuff. And it's not necessarily going to be broken down into things right, things wrong. Just here's experiences and stuff that he wants to talk about.
I do want to jump in and say that every time Jim McLaughlin's interviewed me for something, he does it old school where he interviews you and then he writes up an article based off of what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's not usually a verbatim translation or transcript.
Mm-hmm.
It is usually in some sort of context.
Yeah.
Which you don't see a lot of anymore. Usually it's just we record a conversation and I type it out exactly kind of thing.
Here are the questions. These are the answers.
However, due to the length of the Chuck Rozanski one, I don't know if that's the way he did it.
Yeah, I don't know. The things that Chuck talked about are largely things that anyone would talk about in these sort of articles, and that's kind of the experiences, how the market's changed, what they've learned, how they're hopefully doing their jobs better. But some of the stuff that Chuck talks about is very, like Patrick said, polarizing, in that he specifically says that the market is way healthier if you divorce yourself from carrying new product and dealing with Diamond as your main supplier for comic books and specialty items.
Divorcing yourself from Diamond, from dealing with Diamond.
Yeah. He's not saying don't do it at all, but minimize it as much as you can. And not in a, you should be ordering your new books from Ingram or from Consortium. It's him saying, do not carry new product. Like, carry what you have to for your customers, but all of your time and money should be spent on acquiring old things at a much deeper discount, like buying collections, and reselling that stuff, because that's where the money is. That stuff is way more valuable to you than whatever you get in your weekly Diamond order. And that is a very different model of running a comic shop in 2019 than a lot of people are. I would go so far as to say that we, challengers, are literally the polar opposite of what Chuck Rozanski is doing in Mile High in Colorado. Like, he talks about how he could basically stop getting new stuff and still have stuff to sell for months, if not years.
Well, he does have millions of comics.
Yes. Like, he has literally a warehouse, a gigantic warehouse full of stuff. Like, he used to run multiple stores, and he closed them down and absorbed everything into one location. He spends most of his days buying collections, and that to him is way more valuable. He's a guy, though, that came up on the back issue market. One of his claims to fame is that he bought a virtually pristine Golden Age collection back in the day, the Edgar Church collection. That was a guy who had basically the first 10 issues of Action Comics, or God knows how many, but at least 1 through 10. Early everything, and they were in gem mint condition.
No, that's
beyond
not
brand
to be confused with the Edgar Winter collection.
Correct.
Which is basically all just Joe Lansdale adaptations.
Yeah. Well, all Joe Lansdale apology letters, I think.
There's going to be 2 listeners who get that.
That's good. They're very old. I hope they know that. Like us. So, yeah.
I mean, we're not as old as Edgar Winter.
It's true. So, yeah, the Chuck Rozanski thing, definitely, I can't speak to the how people were taking it in the retail community because I don't look at that stuff. But it's a very different perspective on the current comic market. And, it was a little bit of doom and gloom of, people should get out of carrying new comics because the market is unsustainable and it's going to collapse and these publishers aren't going to stick around. So just stock up on old material now while you can, because that's what's going to support you going forward.
Buy your back issues, pennies on the dollar, pennies on the pound.
Yeah. It was a, start storing things for winter because winter is coming and there will be no new comics and no one's going to want them anymore. But all your old back issues are going to be valuable, which is I'm paraphrasing, I'm sure, a lot.
Sure.
What Chuck Rozanski's argument was. But that's a thing where I kind of don't understand that market, and that's one of the reasons why we don't serve it, is because I can't figure out that mentality. The idea that, sure, no one's buying new comics, but everyone's always going to want these old comics. Why? Why is someone going to want 2015 Secret Avengers issues if there's no new Avengers comics coming out?
And also
who's filling that storyline in
for above cover price?
Yeah. I mean, that's a thing that's worth pointing out is the market is unhealthy in a way because the whole point of comics, and Chuck brings this up, in the 1970s and 80s when direct market retailers were first starting out, the market made a lot of sense because while you bought non-returnable, you got a good discount, and if you bought more copies than you could sell off of the rack, you just put them in the back issues, and eventually you'd sell them for more. Like, all these things would eventually sell because someone somewhere is going to need that issue of Amazing Spider-Man or Action Comics or whatever. But the big shift in the market in the late 90s and early 2000s was how dominant graphic novels and trade paperbacks became. And suddenly you had a way into those storylines and those characters that didn't require you to find high-priced back issues or dig through the bins to find the issues you were missing for. You just buy the book that had the story in it, and that was it. And now there's a ton of people where that's their engagement with it. If they want to read old stories, they just buy Marvel Epic collections. They don't try and track down 300, 400 issues of Amazing Spider-Man. They just buy 10 or 12 graphic novels over the next 3 years as they come out.
Yeah.
The end. And because of that, that means that the new comics, if you can't sell them off the rack, the back issue market mostly doesn't exist. Occasionally something's going to spike and you're going to get speculators and it's going to become valuable, but it's for a very small window. Or maybe down the line something becomes a movie and that becomes a little bit more valuable.
A much older time period as well.
But, between those two poles, you've got 98% of the market that's worth nothing. Like the stuff that goes in our 99-cent back issues. And eventually, 7 years later, we have to clean that stuff out because no one's even buying that for 99 cents.
Yep.
And it's just taking up room. So, yeah,
I know stores that have dollar boxes, 50-cent boxes, 25-cent boxes.
Yeah.
Pass.
So that's the thing that the kind of conundrum in it that I don't understand in Chuck's argument is him basically saying, like, don't bother carrying new stuff because no one's looking for it. And then it's like, but back issues are really valuable. Like, yeah, I mean, your margin is way better if you're buying it off of people off the street rather than buying it from Diamond, but something no one wants from Diamond is the same thing that something no one wants from a guy who bought it off the street. Like, even if you can market a little less, we're selling these things for $1, which is like 25% of cover price, and no one cares. Can't go much lower than that and still make any money, even if you're buying it for pennies on the dollar.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I get it's clearly working out for Chuck. He seems like he's doing okay, and he's happy with his business model. And I don't want to change gears too quickly, but that's the thing that I don't get about people being mad about it online. Like, I don't understand the model, and it's nothing I would want to do with my business, but it's Chuck's business. He can do whatever he wants with it.
Yeah, this is not a situation that merits no, he's dead wrong.
Yeah,
no, he's right for him.
Yeah, if it's working for him, it's working for him. There's no other argument beyond that, other than I wouldn't do it, which is a different argument.
He's not saying, you're dumb if you don't do it my way. He's saying, if I were you, this is what I would do. Well, if I were me, I would do the exact opposite.
Right. And I don't know that it's, evidentially, you could say that's dumb, because he's doing well with his business, and we are doing less well with our business.
I spent a lot of time reading through a lot of comments from retailers about this. I even told you I was up like an extra hour one night going through a lot of stuff, because there's that much to get through, not even counting the main, the original article. But ultimately, my thoughts on this entire article is, well, good for him.
Yeah, he seems happy.
Yeah, it's definitely not a situation where, stepping back for a second, one of the values of these 3x3s is you can learn from what other retailers do, the same way we learn from the road reports. And while we are not taking anything away from this article to implement in the running of our business, it's still interesting to see what works for him and his view.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is a generational thing, if you can just point to the fact that he's been doing this so much longer than we have, and that that's how he's always done it. But I can tell you that I've been doing this for just about 29 years, and I don't run a store at all the way I used to run a store.
Sure, I would argue that that's not what he's saying. He kind of mentions that he tried doing it a different way, and now at his age, with his experience in the market, he's changing it back to how he originally had it. Like, he talks about how he had multiple stores. And now he's like, I just want one store with a giant warehouse full of stuff. He talked about how he was doing diamond orders, and now he's like, my diamond order's much smaller now, and I'm much happier with that, with having like virtually no diamond bill, of being able to just sell product. And if I stopped buying tomorrow from everybody, I'd still have a ton of comics to sell.
I also feel that his warehouse has got such a reputation that it's definitely a destination for out-of-towners, for people visiting.
Maybe.
I mean, I want to see it one day.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'll buy anything from it, because it doesn't sound like it's the kind of thing that's going to appeal to me, per se.
Sure. I think it's a tricky thing for people to argue that he's doing it wrong, or that people shouldn't take his advice, because I think a lot of his advice comes from a very specific life that he lived, that you couldn't just listen to him and go, oh, I'll start that tomorrow. Like, you would need a huge encyclopedic knowledge of the back issue market. Mm-hmm. You would need to have found huge, valuable collections that can help bankroll an entire comics enterprise for decades. You would need a certain kind of real estate market to make getting a giant warehouse make sense. You would need a passion for the back issue market that if you don't have it, that job becomes kind of untenable. Like, that's the stuff where it's cool that it works for him, but I read that and it's like, I literally could not run that business. Like, I would rather not be in comics if that's the way I have to run a business.
Right. It's not what you like about comics.
Yeah, it's like people who, so much of their model is setting up the comic shows. Like, I wouldn't want to do that, so that's why I don't do that.
What about setting up at a toy show? What about setting up at a not even a toy show, but a toy pitch show?
No, thank you.
Okay. So anyway, I think that answers that.
I hope so.
Right?
Yeah, it definitely was interesting reading just to see kind of how the other half lives. And I'm sorry that people got really upset about it. Some of them felt like they had to post a thing telling people not to do what Chuck said.
Yeah.
Which was very strange. He didn't write a manifesto. He was just asked to talk about his experience. I'm sorry that people felt like he was giving a step-by-step guide to the only way to run a comic show or a comics business.
And another thing that he mentions that a lot of people talk about is how it's so much better if you own the building that you're in.
Yeah, I wish we could do that.
Yeah, but in a major metropolitan city, I don't see that ever being a case.
Yeah,
for us.
If we were out in like the burbs or something, you could probably get a warehouse and an office park for a really good value.
Yeah.
You can't do that in Chicago, not really. Not that we've been able to find.
Not with what we make.
No. So yeah, I would love to. It absolutely is sensible to own the property that you're on for a lot of reasons, but we can't financially, so unfortunately we don't.
All right, so you said you had a list of things that we have overlooked, so I'm going to defer to you as far as topic choosing.
Okay, it's just two things, really.
Okay.
The first one that we did not talk about because it happened on a Friday. DC Comic Books, a major North American comics publisher, decided that they were going to reorganize their labels. A company that previously was DC Comics, DC Vertigo, DC Ink, DC Zoom, is not DC Black Label, is now going forward DC Black Label, which is all of their mature readers product, and DC Kids, which is all of their, I think, middle grade and younger product.
It's
like 12 and under,
it's
basically.
Zoom and their single books like Looney Tunes or Scooby-Doo still remain.
Which I think was just said DC on the front. So now, going forward, at some point when they officially roll all this out, it will say DC Kids.
But they're ending Teen Titans Go.
Right.
They're ending Scooby-Doo Team Up.
Yes.
Are they ending Scooby-Doo?
I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
Because I thought they were, so
maybe.
Scooby-Doo 100 I went heavy on because I'm like, that's the last one we're going to be able to get.
Yeah, I was.
But then I think that was still
probably
going.
For the chop. Then, if they're going to be rebooting or restarting everything.
Yeah.
All of the DC Vertigo product that is currently coming out will be DC Black Label product. Nothing that I know of from DC Vertigo was announced as being canceled. So stuff like Dreaming and some of the other Sandman library books will still be coming out. All of I think the Joe Hill House pop-up imprint, I think, is going to be all coming out from DC Black Label.
That's Black Label, and it starts around Halloween.
Yeah, October.
What about, and I think the question is already answered with Hill House, imprints like Wonder Comics or Young Animal.
They said those are sticking around. Pop-up imprints are not going anywhere. Young Animal is not going anywhere. Wonder Comics is not going anywhere.
But, I mean, obviously, Wonder Comics, it's going to be DC.
Right.
But will Young Animal be Black Label?
I don't know. I don't remember if they've said it. I don't. So here's the thing about all this. I don't care, largely. What label is on it doesn't really matter anymore. Once upon a time, the Vertigo label meant something, but that time ended probably around 2009, if not earlier.
And let's not forget, Vertigo didn't start as a thing they created from the ground up.
No.
It started by taking existing books and folding them in, saying, hey, we can group these together.
Yeah.
And it's
Sandman and Shade and
Hellblazer, Swamp Thing
were all books that were running, and they said, now they're Vertigo books, along with a bunch of new stuff, like, whatever J.M. DeMatteis or Peter Milligan wanted to do.
Sure.
There you go. Here they are.
But at the same time, when they started a label like a Piranha or a Paradox or a...
Helix?
Helix, thank you. Not a Matrix, a Helix.
Helix.
Those never lasted.
No.
So when you created an imprint from nothing, it didn't last.
Yeah, because all that stuff ever is like, it's science fiction stuff. Here's a bunch of science fiction stuff. Like, if the books are good, like Transmetropolitan, fine. Otherwise, people don't really care. And I would argue that maybe that's a thing in comics now. Like, beyond Marvel and DC and, I guess, Image, labels don't really matter. Like, we don't have people come in and saying, I want everything Aftershock does. Or I want everything Vault does. It's not a benefit or a detriment necessarily what your label is. Unless it's like, maybe Zenescope or Dynamite. Maybe then. Boundless. These are probably ones where if you can avoid having those on your comic book, maybe avoid them.
I mean, to be fair, we did have one person who wanted every Vault book.
We did. But that was because they knew people who worked at that company or whatever.
Sure.
So that's just friends buying friends books. And we did have somebody who wanted everything Ahoy did until his financial situation changed and he decided he did not want that anymore. So, going back to DC, one of the things that's a little frustrating is that, and DC seems to do this more than any other publisher I can think of, where they just had DC Ink and DC Zoom, and they're just releasing books, and they're just getting traction in the market, and they're just getting some sort of identity, and then they're like, by the way, they're not called that anymore. Like, how did you plan this so poorly?
I mean, how many of those books came out? 4, 6?
Well, Zoom, I think, 1? I think maybe just the Super Sons book.
Okay.
And then Ink, like, 2 or 3. Catwoman, Mira, and Teen Titans Raven.
Yeah.
And Raven came out, like, a few days after they announced they were getting rid of the imprint. So that's, messaging-wise, that's just frustrating. Like, DC has a tendency to announce these things and then change names or just shutter imprints. How's CMX and Mix doing? So
CMX.
At least
wait, hold on. Uh-huh. There's one more. What was their webcomic imprint that you got to vote on?
Oh, God.
You know what I'm talking about?
I do. Yeah. I'm gonna look that up.
We'll come back to it.
I gotta look it up because that's gonna bug me. But I know the one you mean. Yeah, because everything was printed in like that sort of like web strip format. That was popular for a while. That like.
And this is only like
if you turn your phone sideways so it's longer at the top than it is on the side.
10 years ago, 9 years ago,
format.
right about that time.
Yeah, I'm gonna type in DC Comics imprints and see.
And I think that.
See if we can find some other shuttered imprints.
Runs the gamut of DC's shuttered imprints.
I'm sure there's some. List of DC Comics imprints.
Okay.
Let's see if we can. Let's bring this up. Imprints. All-Star, which is gone.
Right. Forgot about that one.
DC Focus. Launched in 2004, defunct mid-2005. That was like Hard Time.
Oh, yes, those
Kinetic.
4 books, yeah. Yes. The one where they shared the pieces of the Iron Man suit.
Yeah.
And then the circus one.
I don't know if I know the circus one.
I can't remember what was the other one. It was the... who was Howard Chaykin's writing partner?
Oh, David
Tishman, yeah.
Okay.
It was his book.
Impact Comics, which I don't know if that counts.
Yeah.
It
totally counts. It totally counts.
Johnny DC. which was DC's imprint for its all ages cartoon titles.
But they're Cartoon Network specifically ones?
Looney Tunes Cartoon Network. That was 2004 to 2012.
Okay.
Minx.
Yeah, of course. God, Mr. Oh, we got them all. No, we didn't even come close.
2007 to 2008.
The Plain Janes. And...
Yeah, Minx was the one that bothers... Like, that's the thing that bothered me in the back of my head when they were like, we're doing YA stuff. It's like, you tried that and you got cold feet so fast.
But that was with original stories, not superhero characters. They did it so fast that there was already a third volume of Plain Janes completed that never saw the light of day.
Plain Janes was the only title to get a second volume before the imprint was shut down.
And there was a third, because Jim Rugg drew it.
Yeah, I mean, it was founded in 2007, and then it was canceled in September 2008. New York 4 moved to Vertigo for its sequel, New York 5.
Yeah.
Paradox Press, Piranha Press.
Yeah.
They say Tangent Comics, but that's not really the same thing.
No, that's just that the Tangent is not an imprint.
Vertigo, Wildstorm.
Oh yeah, we didn't mention Wildstorm.
There's sub-imprints of Wildstorm that they list, like America's Best, Cliffhanger, Homage.
Sure.
Zuda Comics was DC Comics' Internet Comics website imprint starting in 2007. It ran a little over 3 years.
Okay.
As unbelievable as that is. So yeah, DC has a kind of disgusting track record of launching stuff and putting some money and some press into it and then getting cold feet kind of real fast for a bunch of these. There's a bunch of these that are like, they didn't last even 2 years, which in general, to me, doesn't seem like nearly enough time to figure out if something's successful or not, especially in a 21st century market, which is a lot of these.
They've been working on Zoom and Ink for over 2 years.
Yeah, they were announcing... In the same weekend, they were announcing a complete reconfiguration of their labels. They were announcing like books for Ink and Zoom in 2021.
Yeah.
But except they're not called Ink or Zoom when they were announcing that. They're like DC Kids and DC Comics. So yeah, that's weird and frustrating. Beyond that, though, I don't feel like it was wrong for them to get rid of Vertigo. There's a knee-jerk thing of like, oh man, I remember when Vertigo meant the most. But then there's that thing where you realize, oh, that stopped being a thing 10 years ago, and their heyday was probably 20 years ago.
Yeah, and honestly, if there's one thing we've taught ourselves or learned from the industry, is that you have to move on from those things.
Sure.
What worked may not still work. What was a good idea may not still be a good idea. And you just have to, you don't always have Vertigo because at one time Vertigo worked.
Yeah, while you and I might look at that as, the dawning of big corporate mainstream adult material, that doesn't mean anything to the people who are in their mid-20s who are coming into comic shops now. They might know about Sandman and Y the Last Man and Preacher, but Vertigo doesn't mean anything to them. They weren't around when those books were coming out sequentially. Right. They weren't around when... they can count on one hand the number of Vertigo books they might want to read. There's no halo effect of that anymore, where they're like, oh, I didn't realize that Vertigo was Y the Last Man and Sandman and Preacher. I'm going to definitely check out...
Mystery Play, it's Vertigo, so I'll check it out.
County or whatever. Yeah. They don't... Who cares?
It doesn't work that
way. It doesn't mean anything, and they're certainly not going to pick up, Imaginary Fiends or Goddess Mode or whatever. They don't care.
There aren't, to use the phrase zombies from the Marvel Zombies, there aren't company zombies that we see anymore. We don't have anybody who gets everything any one publisher does. You first of all, you can't.
Yeah.
Second of all, nobody's tastes are that varied.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, you want to try stuff, you want to sample stuff, but there was a point when my brother George and I were buying every comic that came out. Because they were comics and we loved them.
Yeah.
But that was foolish and expensive and causes me to have a full storage locker.
Sure. Lessons learned.
Right.
You're on your way to being Chuck Rosansky. One of the things that's weird about this whole thing is that when DC announced it, that they were solidifying things as DC Black Label, DC Kids, obviously DC is in all of those. And it seemed as though to me... the refocusing of those lines was going to coincide with a real refocusing of the IP.
Yeah.
DC Black Label is mature readers' Batman comics. Not exclusively, but thoroughly DC mature readers' Batman comic books. And DC Kids is going to be
your gateway Batman comics.
12 and under DC superhero characters for children. You know, whether that's a Diary of a Wimpy Kid biting Swamp Thing book, or, you know, Batman and Superman, but they go to grade school, like whatever it is, it's for kids and it features the DC IP. So what was surprising to me, though, was that the Hill House pop-up imprint announcement that Joe Hill's doing, all original material.
Yeah, nothing tied into the DC universe.
I was expecting it to be stuff of, like, clearly Swamp Thing, maybe Animal Man, like Justice League Dark style characters that maybe don't have solo books. But no, it's completely original horror comics.
Well, you said this, and it's a thing that I agree with. We don't know how long this deal's been going on.
Yeah.
You wondered how often they had to edit the word Vertigo out of the press releases.
I felt like maybe they might have needed to, that it was supposed to be part of Vertigo, and now Vertigo doesn't exist, so it's like, no, DC Comics. So yeah, it could just be a thing of this is the last dregs of when Vertigo was going to try another relaunch, another rebranding, and now it just becomes a pop-up imprint under DC Black Label. So I still think predominantly they're going to be moving away. With Vertigo going away, I think the days of them soliciting brand new pitches and putting original work together that doesn't feature DC IP, I think that's pretty much over. In the same way that Marvel Comics kind of doesn't do that stuff anymore.
Right.
Even when they were doing more of a dedicated mature readers imprint with Max, things were intended to still be
in the Marvel universe.
Marvel characters or Marvel adjacent.
Long gone is the Epic line.
Yeah, that stuff, I don't think Marvel or DC as companies see any value in trying to be that as a comics publisher.
The new universe rolled into the main universe whenever possible.
Frankly, there's enough companies doing that sort of material that you don't need the kind of benefit of Marvel or DC saying, we're also doing it. They're part of a much larger transmedia enterprise that means that they need to kind of serve a corporate master a lot more than just making good comic books, and that means making sure that the stuff that's in movies and TV shows and t-shirts and theme parks is front and center in their comic book publishing. That's, I think, the thing that maybe makes me a little sad, but I haven't liked any of the recent Vertigo comics they've done. So I don't, again, know that this is any great loss that DC is not doing it anymore.
You're not lamenting a loss of anything. It wasn't for you anyway.
Yeah, again, other publishers are doing the material that I would want to read from that. DC hasn't shown an ability to make a kind of book that I would want to read, so let them just do superhero stuff. The stuff that made Vertigo great was people like Karen Berger and Shelley Bond, and they're still doing stuff at other companies.
Yeah.
And I like those books, so I feel like I'm good.
I do appreciate DC wanting to stick with their IP and focusing on the letters D and C, the same way that for most of the Challengers initiatives that we've rolled out over the years, it uses the word Challengers or a play on the word Challengers, just because you want to keep your branding consistent.
Sure.
And as fun as...
Because how many of those imprints that we were listing off did we even remember?
Right. Yeah. So many.
We would have never guessed Zuda if you would have given us a year to think of it.
Yeah, definitely. And while Zuda made sense at the time, I'm sure, it doesn't... Nothing about that says DC.
Right. You have to put DC in front of it, and that means it didn't work.
And it's... Whether this is lip service or not, and I feel like I've already said lip service earlier in this podcast, so I don't want to overuse it, but I like the way they say that their goal is to start young readers with a young reader Batman, and then give them a different Batman for all stages of their life as a way to get kids into comics, because right now it's our job to get the kids who are reading Amulet or Dogman into the next level of comic book reading. Like, you and I are the ones that have to do that.
Right.
But if, not that Dogman should grow with them and become grim and gritty as for the adult.
Oh, man.
But when there's a clear path.
Right.
And I was talking with a friend this morning about how when I was a kid, and let's say when my parents got married, or that generation of people get married, you get fancy china as wedding gifts. You decorate your new home with nice furniture. Like, we had a living room that kids were not allowed in because it's for adults and it had to stay clean.
Sure.
And you get houses that adults live in. Well, now I am significantly older than they were at that point. Mm-hmm. And my home, my car, my store are all decorated with the things that I have always liked. How many different iterations of a TARDIS can you find amongst my possessions? A lot. Because I think Doctor Who is awesome,
sure.
And I can't imagine not having to be part of my life. They finally make adult comic book bed sheets. And by that I mean they make comic book bed sheets that fit queen-size beds and king-size beds, not just twin beds.
Yeah, a child's bed.
Still, the child's sheets have way more diversity and way more fun concepts.
Sure.
And characters. You can walk through Target and just like, oh, look at all the Marvel Rising sheets they have.
Sure.
But those are only for twin beds.
Right.
You know, as you get older and you get a bigger bed.
Hopefully.
But I still have Marvel Comics bed sheets. I have Venture Brothers bed sheets because they make those for adults. And I can have all of this, for lack of a better phrase, nerd memorabilia as the way I decorate my house. Now, it's not like my plate settings are all Captain America shields or something. That's not to say they wouldn't be if they made them. Also, all of my plates and saucers and bowls are hand-me-downs from when my siblings changed their patterns or whatever. Because changing a pattern is, I don't know, not a thing that matters to me that much.
No.
And I don't care what my plates look like.
No.
But that was a big deal, picking out China patterns.
Sure.
There were catalogs that would come to your house and you'd be like, oh, do I want the wheat? Do I want the apple? Do I want the little cross-stitch pattern? Like, what do I want?
I mean, I feel like that's a much bigger discussion about the way that milestones for adulthood have changed substantially in generations. Some of it is societal in its shift, where there's more of an embracing of the things that you love and an ability to be unafraid about sharing those things. I mean, you can be an adult in his 50s or 60s and wear a Captain America t-shirt walking down the street. But we see those all the time.
I guess what I was trying to say is that I didn't get to grow up with different stages of Spider-Man. There was just Spider-Man when I was a kid and Spider-Man now, which obviously they do have the younger reader books thanks to the Marvel Action Comics.
Yes.
And a lot of younger reader stuff like that. But the regular monthly buy it off the newsstand when I was a kid Spider-Man book was for everybody. Now it's targeted a little bit older, that's for sure.
Yeah, some of that, again, much larger discussion, but it's because back in the day, the idea was kids would read Marvel or DC comics, superhero comics, from when they were like 8 to 12, and then they'd be done. So you'd constantly have a new group of 8 to 12-year-olds. And Marvel figured out, well, 11 and 12-year-olds don't want to read stuff for 11 and 12-year-olds. They want to read stuff for 13 and 14-year-olds. So you pitch it a little bit older, and they feel like they're into it. But the problem is once you start doing that, then you get people who are like, well, this doesn't seem as childish as the comics that I used to read. It seems like I could keep reading this through my teens. And then you have a generation in the 70s and 80s that just keep reading it.
Yeah.
And they stick with it. And suddenly publishers are shifting how they're publishing these things because you have a teen and adult audience now for these superhero comics. So maybe it needs to be, something where a 20 or 30-year-old doesn't get embarrassed reading it.
But at the cost of those 8 to 11-year-olds.
And then all of a sudden you have Batman and Spider-Man comics where when a 10-year-old's like, I want to read this, I'm like, I don't know if I want you to read that. You're not going to get a lot out of this because it's either weirdly violent or about a sad adult man being a sad adult man. Like, I don't know if that's going to mean a lot to you.
Also having sex with a cat on a rooftop.
Yeah, that's weird. Boy, that threw me off. So yeah, I think it makes perfect sense if you're looking at these things less in the sense of your one Batman comic or whatever, and start thinking about it in terms of like Batman is an IP that has a lot of different expressions. So there should be a Batman comic for 8-year-olds. There should be a Batman comic for 14-year-olds, and I guess there should be a Batman comic for 28-year-olds. Like, those are all fine things to have. They
and 51-year-olds.
They don't negate each other. Don't have that. That's weird. Then you're just going to have Batman, Superman Generations 4 or whatever. Is that what you want? That's what the market needs?
I will tell you that John Byrne talked about a while ago, just for fun, he's going to write and draw X-Men as if 138 on changed.
Sure.
Like 137, Jean Grey didn't die.
He got his ending instead of Jim Shooter's ending?
Well, I mean, yeah, and he just moves forward. And so far he's put up 28 pages online.
All right.
And I read them this afternoon.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's a total throwback because it's John Byrne doing those characters. They're fighting AIM and MODOK.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
it doesn't hurt me. What do I care?
Exactly. I mean, it's a fun, nostalgic look back.
Sure.
And as somebody that got into the X-Men at that time period, they look like the X-Men that I grew up with.
Sure.
You know, his Scott Summers, his Surly Wolverine, his brand new to the team Sprite.
Sure.
You know, his team is Cyclops, Wolverine, Colossus, Storm, Nightcrawler, Sprite.
Sure. It's a good lineup.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all on his Facebook page, so you can read them for free.
So anyway, in conclusion, anything else you wanted to say about DC shifting its imprints around?
Nope, I think we covered it good.
All right, so the last thing I wanted to talk about was this week saw the conclusion of War of the Realms, a giant Marvel Thor-themed, Jason Aaron written, Russell Dodderman drawn epic event.
Before you continue, I haven't read it.
Okay, I don't really plan on talking about spoiler stuff, because I assume there's going to be people listening to this who have not read it.
Yeah.
So I don't want to spoil anything. So
just remember, read War of the Realms 6 and then this week's Thor.
Yeah.
They both take place at the same time.
Yeah.
But Thor ruins things. I'm just doing your speech.
Thanks. So the two things I wanted to talk about in regards to War of the Realms were about it as a comic book and then about it as an event miniseries sold by Marvel Comics. So we'll do the business part of it first, because this is a comics industry business podcast on the Yak Channel Podcast Network, recorded here in Chicago, about Challengers Comics and Conversation. I'm W. Dale Bush, your Patrick Brower.
Usually.
So, as a business thing, the event miniseries kind of has to do two things. It has to sell a main event miniseries, in this case the 6-issue War of the Realms book, Jason Aaron, Russell Dodderman. But it also has to be an umbrella that gets people to buy miniseries, one-shots, tie-in issues. How do you think it did for us on those terms?
Well, the miniseries itself did fine.
Yeah,
it did
better than Thor, not setting the world on fire.
It's not like Secret Invasion numbers. It's not like the major arc of the Marvel Universe for a 6-month period, because first of all, it was condensed, so it was only 3 months.
Right.
And secondly, it barely crossed over with other books because they just gave them their own miniseries to do that. And when you do that, it doesn't feel like it's reaching the whole Marvel Universe. I mean, there were books like Fantastic Four and Squirrel Girl and Tony Stark that did cross over
Avengers, kind of,
into those books, but they didn't feel necessary at all. And as far as the tie-in books, every time we say, we're going to go super low, and then we still get killed on things. Not everything.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, we did go low and we still got killed, which is very bad news going forward for Marvel Comics and their events.
The Strike Force books, nobody cared about at all.
Right.
And we went a little bit higher because there were names. Tom Taylor wrote one.
Yeah.
You know, Lionel Yu drew
Plus,
one.
The teams were cool, like the characters in it, and it was directly out of that week's issue of War of the Realms. Like, War of the Realms, they split up, and then they published these 3 other books over the next 3 weeks. But everyone felt like they could pass on it. No one felt like they wanted to read more about it.
Because those single issues were already resolved.
Yeah.
They basically take a page of War of the Realms and say, here's a deeper dive into it, but you've already gotten past that because you finished the issue that they were in.
So I guess that's the thing that I want to talk about, is the kind of double-edged sword. For years, people were saying that they hated how these big events would cross over into all these books and force them to read chapters of things they don't care about, you know? If they don't read X-Men, why do I have to read all this Inferno stuff? Why is there a Civil War thing in the middle of this issue of a comic that doesn't have anything to do with Civil War? Why does all this stuff have to spread out like that? So Marvel was basically, for the last few years, that they've been doing events, they do it in a real, clearly identifiable format. Like, the event is called War of the Realms. Here are 6 War of the Realms issues numbered 1 through 6. There are a few different War of the Realms miniseries. War of the Realms Punisher, War of the Realms Uncanny X-Men. So if you're reading Punisher and Uncanny X-Men, they don't, like, interrupt those stories. But if you like those characters, here's a thing that's tied into the event that you can read those characters in. And some of them, like Uncanny X-Men, have the same writer doing both. Matthew Rosenberg did Uncanny. He also did War of the Realms Uncanny X-Men. And there's a few one-shots, and there's a couple things here and there where if a writer feels like they could really do something with it, they'll tie something into it. Dan Slott wants to play along, so he does a one-issue thing where Yancey Street fights back against Frost Giants.
And that was fun.
Yeah. Squirrel Girl has a history of having a Norse villain in it, so you can bring that character back to pal around and be a frenemy to Squirrel Girl for a few months. And it's a fun Squirrel Girl take on an event like that. Squirrel Girl traditionally does not cross over into these big events. So having it be something where, yeah, Loki's been a character who's been in the book a few times, so that's a good, like, motivating factor for the character. And then you've got, you know, this squirrel Norse god that is part of it. So sure, okay.
Yeah.
But when they've been doing that now, we're seeing these diminishing returns where people just say, yes, I'll get War of the Realms. No, I'm not going to read anything else because I know it doesn't matter.
Yes, nothing major from the War of the Realms story is going to happen anywhere but War of the Realms.
Yeah, people spent years saying, I don't want to have to read another book to find out what happened in this main book. So when Marvel's like, fine, we're going to put all the main events in this one, then people are like, great, now I don't have to buy these other books. So suddenly these tie-ins do nothing. And I gotta feel like the exact same pattern is going to happen with Absolute Carnage, where we're seeing not a ton of signups necessarily for Absolute Carnage because we crossed everyone over who got Venom because it's the same writer and it's spilling out of that storyline. Same thing we did for War of the Realms and Thor. But I don't expect a ton of people to be getting all of the different tie-ins and stuff for Absolute Carnage.
So far we have 2 people.
Same thing for War of the Realms. We had a few people who were like, I will take every War of the Realms tie-in. But it wasn't more than 5 people.
Right.
And that's bad. So my question to you is, what does Marvel have to change this sort of setup into if it clearly has run out of gas? Like, if the point of an event miniseries as a publishing plan is to sell a bunch of other comic books, and it can't reliably sell a bunch of other comic books anymore, what is the solution to that?
To not sell a bunch of other comic books.
Is it just to give up on that model entirely?
Focus on the main story.
Okay.
And I think they'll never do it because they're not about content. They're about quantity.
But even then, like, that is, even for a company that is been fine selling lower numbers of different books because they're selling a lot more different books, this is unsustainable because it's just cycling down. Like, we're going to order a lot less for Absolute Carnage tie-ins than we did for War of the Realms tie-ins.
To be fair, we were already going to.
But now even less than we would have before, and we ordered less of War of the Realms than we did of whatever the previous event was because we got burned on that.
Well, part of the reason...
We can't keep getting burned, even if we keep reducing our order.
Part of the reason is because of how fast these are coming out.
They really are. Absolute Carnage starts next month.
Yeah, and they don't have the weight that they used to have where, you know, oh my god, Civil War 2... This is the story in the Marvel Universe. Now, War of the Realms...
sucks so badly.
It did. War of the Realms
and
was...
people did not want to buy those tie-ins.
a good storyline, but it was basically a Thor storyline that they pulled, like, the Punisher into, and a few other things. Absolute Carnage is just Spider-Man and Venom.
Yeah, which, I mean, for me as someone who can read these things for free, basically skipping Absolute Carnage, because I don't care about Venom, I don't care about Carnage, I don't care about symbiotes. Like, this whole thing is all content I don't care about. And that's not good, because I'm predisposed to reading Marvel comic books, and if I can say, your entire 3-month event is something I have zero interest in, that's not good.
It always feels like it falls to the idea of a creator saying, hey, I've got this great storyline coming up, and then editorial says, oh, it's going to be an event.
Maybe. I don't know how much that's true. I think people like doing big events. I think people like doing stuff where they get to kind of make an impact on the Marvel Universe in a big way.
When you're already promoting the next one, these lose their importance, and people aren't as concerned.
So do you think they should just go on a hiatus with events in 2020? Maybe just take a year off and go, you know what?
Or just do the miniseries part of it. And also, don't forget that even if you take away all of the Absolute Carnage tie-ins, Marvel's still putting out more books than ever before.
So many.
So for somebody to have to sign on to, 64 issues
for War of the Realms?
For War of the Realms?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. On top of everything else they're doing?
Yeah. That's assuming you still want to read Spider-Man comics and Avengers comics and Captain America comics.
Like, I don't think that it's a failing so much of the stories, it's that they're just suffocating the marketplace. They're suffocating the readers who might have interest in this, who they have to budgetarily or just time-wise say, I don't have time to read all this.
Because I think they've already said that, like, War of the Realms and Absolute Carnage, and then there's, like, a third thing that's going to be happening. Like, August, September, October is Absolute Carnage.
Yeah.
And then there's, like, a third thing that I assume we'll find out.
Oh, I'm sure it's a new next big X-Men crossover.
Maybe? That would be more like November, December, January or something. Yeah, I like the idea of just doing the big book and maybe leaving it at that.
Like, look at Secret Empire.
I'd love it if they just took a break for a while.
Secret Empire was 9 issues, and it wasn't bi-weekly, was it? Some of them were, some of them weren't.
There were like 3 a month, I think, for some of them.
All right,
I know Axis was 3 a month.
It also had...
Remember Axis?
Yeah, but Axis
Jesus.
wasn't the story. It was a story.
That's true. It was big, though.
Yeah, even AVX wasn't the story. It was a story.
That was really big.
And that should be the focus of what they're doing. So it's too hard to bring everything into a story.
Right.
To bring every character and every creator. But if you don't, it feels like it doesn't have the gravitas that it needs to be a major event. And then when you have the next several things planned, none of these have the chance to just have the weight.
Sure.
It's binge watching, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the second thing that I want to talk about for War of the Realms was kind of creatively how it worked. Like, again, I don't want to talk about the ending. But in general, like you were saying, I think one of the things that was weird about it, maybe sort of limiting to its sales potential, was that it was very much a story about Thor. If you weren't already reading Thor, and you just checked into War of the Realms, it's a good story, but it doesn't feel big and Marvel and epic. And it made me realize that Jason Aaron's Original Sin, which was a big Marvel event he did some years back, was kind of the same thing. Where it was this kind of small story about a couple characters. It had a big impact on Thor.
Yeah.
And it set up a lot of what happened in the Jane Foster Thor run. But it didn't feel like it seismically changed the Marvel Universe. And it got me thinking, it seems like most Marvel events I can think of have a variety of problems with them. And the only writer I can think of that effectively balanced telling a huge story with having the character beats actually make sense and be something that felt like there was character agency in it was Hickman.
It was going to be Infinity. I knew it.
Infinity, Secret Wars.
Yeah.
And he was on AVX. And those are the 3 that I think of when I think of successful Marvel events from the last 15 years. Like, even Civil War, I think it's got a bunch of problems in it, and a bunch of those tie-ins don't really matter or make any sense.
Yeah.
And it has an ending that just feels like a total cop-out. But yeah, Civil War 2, Secret Invasion, Original Sin. What was the...
Siege?
Siege, for sure. What was the Fraction one?
I don't remember.
Didn't it have, like... Didn't it start with an S?
I don't remember.
God, I gotta look that one up. Fear Itself.
Oh, yeah! Yeah, that one.
Matt Fraction's Fear Itself. Just stuff where... It felt like people either wanted to tell a small story that became real big, or it was a big story that didn't have much of a focus. And Hickman was the guy where it felt like he was the one that figured it out. Where it was, you get to the end and you're like, man, I'm glad I read that, instead of, Jesus, I read all those books for this. And I like the ending of War of the Realms. I don't want that to seem like like I was let down in any way. But it is very much a Thor story. If it had just been...
And it sets up more in Thor.
Yeah, if it had just been like Thor 11 through 16, I think you would have gotten the same effect. So making it this big event was like, I guess.
And I was going to say, but it made us more money. But it didn't if you take away all the books we ordered and didn't sell. Correct.
Yeah, if you discount all of the ones that we got burned on, and some of the ones that we got burned on were because of Marvel's incredibly frustrating solicitation schedule, where we were ordering issues 1 and 2 of a 3-issue miniseries before issue 1 came out.
Yeah.
So by the time we found out, oh, there is virtually no interest in these, your orders are locked in. The end.
And just so many dumb things where we talked about before, most of them were called War of Realms, whatever the title was, except Giant Man.
Which was just called Giant Man.
But then you have War of Realms, Spider-Man, and the League of Realms, 1 and 2, and then issue 3 is called Spider-Man and League of Realms.
Yep.
They forgot, nope, it doesn't count as that.
It's not tied in anymore, despite it being on the cover.
For example, the new Matt Fraction and Steve Lieber book from DC, what is that called?
The first issue is called Jimmy Olsen.
And then?
Then it's
Superman's
called
pal,
Jimmy
Olsen.
Olsen, number 2 of 12.
I feel like that's a thing you should have worked out already.
You'd think so. You'd be wrong. So yeah, I did enjoy War of the Realms. I don't think it was a huge sales success for us.
But what tie-ins did you read?
I read all of the first issues of the tie-ins.
Okay.
And then I pretty much stopped reading them because I didn't like what I read. And it didn't feel like it was enhancing my experience at all so much as it was just creating more content. I liked some of the War Scrolls stuff. There were some fun stories in there. And I read the books that I normally read, like Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, Fantastic Four. I read the first chapter of the Tony Stark Iron Man tie-in and then did not want to read the second chapter because it felt completely irrelevant to the book I'd been reading for the last 10 issues.
Yeah, I liked the FF one because it was a one-off, it was fun, and it tied into, like, it was almost an epilogue to their last storyline.
Yeah. This is just like, I don't know, what if Iron Man fights a dragon? Because there's dragons now. Okay. I don't care.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely get worried a little bit because so much of Marvel's publishing plans is built around these big tentpole events. And I see them working less and less well as they go on. And that's not good.
They can work. They just need to be marketed as a big deal and not just the next thing.
I think they are marketed as a big deal. It's just a matter of, I don't think that's true. Like, every one of these is shaking the foundations of the Marvel Universe, and Carnage is running rampant over the Marvel Universe. Everything is about, it's affecting the Marvel Universe, but then it's gone in 3 months.
Not every single book can be an earth-shattering reading experience with long-lasting repercussions. And that was the thing that had come up this week, where it was pointed out that whoever is writing all the press releases for comic publishers have to stop insulting their readers and also maybe get a thesaurus. Because everything is the same. It's the same. You can't miss this. It's the most important comic you're going to read. Your life is meaningless without it. And then I don't like that.
Yeah, Marvel in particular has been dinged, and rightfully so, for really pushing the idea that books matter more than they're good. That you have to read something, you can't miss something, rather than this book is really good. Because it's easier for them to market on the backs of, FOMO.
Right.
It's hard for them to market on, this is really good and you're going to like it. So I think that's why the marketing tends towards, it's a huge deal, you're not going to understand what's going on if you don't read this. This is the first look at the next blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, and listeners know, my, not disdain for current comic descriptions, but how I don't feel that they do their job as well, and
I agree with that.
How I have to edit them regularly.
Clearly they don't do their job very well because we don't get a lot of people buying those books.
Yeah. For example, the Lois Lane comes out this upcoming week.
Yes, excited.
And it's good, but one of the things I thought needed to be focused on for us...
Her friendship with Clark Kent.
...was her friendship. Mm-hmm. No, a thing that wasn't pointed out in the solicitation, which I understand why it wasn't, so I added it. First line of our description says, takes place in Chicago.
Yeah, there you go.
Lois Lane is in Chicago, living at the Drake.
Sure.
We all know the Drake.
Yeah.
And I think that connects more to people, but because we're geographic. I'm not saying that they need to do that, but...
People in Minneapolis probably don't care a whole lot if it's in
but
Chicago.
That is a thing I thought needed to be focused on.
Sure.
But then, at the same time, I took some shots at Mark Miller in his solicitation for
his new Kim and Kim book.
For his...
Kim and Kim, oh shit, they're space bandits.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. I think that there needs to be less hyperbole and more clear-cut, easy descriptions of what this is.
I don't know. It's a fine line. Obviously, you want to drum up some enthusiasm with people. So coming in with, like, here's what the book is about, the end, becomes like... I read a lot of those when I'm formatting the month's catalog for the website.
Yeah.
And they're largely from people in the back half of the catalog.
Mm-hmm.
And no one wants to ever order those books because it's just this, like, dry, kind of boring version of, like, man, it's like those movie trailers where you watch it and you're like, that's the whole movie. Like, you didn't give me, like, a sizzle reel or some bullet points. You laid out exactly what happens in the plot of the first...
Tell me what it's about. Don't tell me what the story is.
3/4 of the film. Like, that doesn't make me want to go see it. And that's what's always tricky about... Like, when we have to suggestive sell books, when we have to give a pitch to someone...
Which you are so much better at than I am, because I tend to talk about what the story is about, where you tend to talk about what the book is about.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is if you're just, like, reciting what happens in the issue of the comic, that's information, but it's not why I would want to buy it. That's just telling me what the book is about. You know, I could read the back of a graphic novel and it might tell me the same thing. What I want to know is, like, what is it like? How is it going to make me feel? What kind of story
Which
is
historical war is it an allegory for?
Exactly. Like, there's not, like, I don't have a blueprint for how I do this, but the last stuff that I want to talk about when I'm talking about a book, like, I'll give you a little hook of something, of, like, a dynamic thing that happens in the story, or, like, what the core dilemma is, but I don't want to just say, like, oh, here are all the things that happen in the first 6 issues of Ms. Marvel.
Sure.
Like, that, you're going to read the book, I hope. And that's a bunch of kind of back of the catalog stuff is very, here is the entire premise of the book in a paragraph. Like, that's way too much.
Yeah.
I feel like that's way too much.
I agree. I'm not saying I'm good at writing book descriptions.
I think you are.
I'm saying I'm good at editing book descriptions.
Sure.
I can tell you what you shouldn't put in there.
Yeah. That's a valuable skill.
I think so. I mean, for our purposes.
Yeah.
Plus, I think that, like, we'll highlight 5, 6, 8 books a week, and if it's more than 3 sentences, no one's reading that.
Oh, absolutely.
Hell, they're not even reading what we put out now, I'm sure.
Yeah. No, they do. Because you can see responses sometimes. Like, when we had... the week that Last Night on Earth was coming out, I had to do that email.
Yeah.
And it was rough because I'm like, I want to keep... There's core things I want to keep in there, which is, it's a Black Label book, it's got Batman and the Joker in it, it's post-apocalyptic, it's by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, who did Batman. Which is a lot of information. Like, normally you'd only want to keep 1 or 2 of those things to keep it real concise, but I'm like, I gotta keep all this stuff. And it seemed like it worked, because all of that stuff seemed like it added up to a lot of people saying, oh my god, I want that book. So sometimes it can be a thing where you don't want to run the risk of being too concise.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
Like, there's things that you want to make sure that it's an appealing listing.
I offer this to any creator who's listening to this. If you want to send me your, not your pitch, but your blurb, I will tell you what I think it should say without having read your book, in a way to make it where I think people would want to read the book. I'll offer that to anybody.
That's nice.
Just to see if that helps explain what I'm talking about. Because I don't have to have read the book, because often when I do these, I haven't read the book.
Yeah.
But I can tell you what I think is extraneous, or what I think is boring, or what I think is cliche.
Yeah, and you can talk about what you respond to.
Yeah.
Like, you've clearly had instances where you've not known anything about a book, read a solicit, and been like, wow, that sounds really cool. I want to check that
exactly.
out.
Yeah. It goes back to recently we talked about how Cemetery Beach, I think, was perfectly concise and right to the point.
Yeah.
But there's some stuff from just this week alone where it's like, all right, it's way too much. You don't describe the world and then bring your character into it. Mm-hmm. Just tighten it up.
Yeah, by sentence 2, I should have some idea of what book I'm going to read.
Yeah.
If I don't want to read sentence 3.
Yeah. All right, moving on to what I think is the last thing we'll talk about this week is DC is really good at giving retailers the opportunity to buy fun displays for their stores, usually in the form of light-up displays. It used to be neon signs, Superman, Batman, what have you.
We've got them up in our window.
Then it changed to LEDs.
Oh, the LEDs, that's right.
Which is what we have up in the windows now.
Correct, yeah, because the neons would burn out.
And most recently, they marketed a 24 by 36 poster frame, light up DC poster frame with a subscription to posters, like double-sided movie posters that you could fit in, backlight, make it look fun, whatever.
Yeah, eye-catching.
So we ordered that. It came in this week, and already there were people online who were complaining about the price point, saying we could have bought this for half the price from a different manufacturer. Here's the thing, whatever. But more than that, the branding is a DC logo sticker and then a plastic cover with the logo on it as well. But the logo sticker is upside down, like it's on the wrong part
end.
of it. Yeah, it's on the where the hardware would go. It's on the top, and at first I thought that might have been a manufacturing issue just for the one that we had, but no, it turned out it's all of those.
Okay, great.
But it also comes with a bunch of hardware that has no explanation. And I used to be a framer, so I'm used to putting frames together and hanging things, but I could not figure this one out. And I'm not a genius by any stretch, but I'm not also really dumb. So if a thing isn't intuitive in an industry I used to work at, I think, maybe it's not me. So I put up a thread about it on the boards, and it turns out that everybody's is the exact same way. While DC is talking to the manufacturer, who, by the way, I emailed and said, hey, how does this work? And they came back with, there's no instruction sheet.
Which is really strange.
It also explains why I didn't find one in the box. The general consensus is you just peel the sticker off and put it the right way. But my thought is, well, if I'm peeling that sticker off,
why am I putting it back on?
Why am I putting it back on?
I'm going to peel it right off and throw it away.
I mean, what made this palatable for us was like, oh, this is a DC branded thing, but it's just a sticker.
Yeah.
And I feel like we can use this for anything.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So somebody showed like, hey, this is how I got it to hang up, and I'll see if that works. But more importantly, we don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah, it's tough because it's a powered sign, which means it can't go like on the front door. Like it has to go someplace
where
else.
It can be plugged in. Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of people are putting it in their front windows, but the setting western sun will wash it out, and it's only good for lit overnight.
Right, when we're closed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll figure something out.
We will. But it's just like, normally I think that all the DC lights are fun. Uh-huh. We didn't order the Aquaman one, and we didn't order the DC logo one.
No.
But I'm like, oh, we can use this frame, and they're going to get us specific inserts for it.
Sure.
Which ship later.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, all right, again, if I hadn't talked to you about it, but that's exactly what I was thinking. If I'm peeling this off, I'm not putting it back on.
Yeah. What if we put it up next to the new release sign in the back of the store? Where Stan Lee's banner is, or to the left side?
We'll see if there's enough room for it.
Okay.
But also...
that's a big open area.
Sure, but it also has to be...
You can see it from the street.
A point where you can
if you're like
turn it off or on
sidewalk.
if you want to.
Okay.
Or would you just leave it on all the time?
Probably just leave it on.
I wonder if that kills its light. Well, the other lights are on, and it's LED, so that's fine. Yeah, I'll see if that works.
I know, that was my thought.
And figure out how the wire hangers work.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, I'm good.
Same here.
Thanks for listening.
Keep reading comics.
This has been Contest of Challengers. Thanks for listening. Keep reading comics. Challengers is located at 1845 Northwestern Avenue in the Bucktown neighborhood of Chicago. 773-278-0155. Keep up to date with new releases and events at challengerscomics.com. Like Challengers Comics on Facebook, follow @Challengers on Twitter, and help fund this podcast at patreon.com/challengers.